mention a couple of things before we get started. Following the reading, we'll have about 10 or 15 minutes Q&A, and I will have a hand mic, so if you have a question, I'll come around and give you that mic so everybody can hear. And then after the Q&A, we have books for sale in the back, and our poet will be back there after the Q&A and happy to sign their books for you. So now it is my pleasure to introduce to you our introducer, one of our fabulous creative writing students, Bailey Casey.
And everyone see me. I know I'm short. Okay. Hello everyone and welcome. Tonight's reading is sponsored by the Georgia Poetry Circuit and the Evans School, and will be a reading by poet and memoirist Shane McCrae. My name is Bailey Casey and I'm a junior creative writing major, and it is my honor to introduce him. Shane McCrae grew up in Texas and California. The first in his family to graduate from college, McCrae earned a BA at Linfield College, an MA at the University of Iowa, an MFA at the Iowa Writers Workshop, and a JD at Harvard Law School. He now teaches as an associate professor at Columbia University's Creative Writing MFA program and is the poetry editor for Image. In the span of 14 years, McCrae has released 10 collections of poetry and a memoir. In 2011, McCrae received the Winning Award, and in 2012, his collection, Mule, was a finalist for the Kate Tufts Discovery Award and Penn Center USA Literary Award. The annual Too Big to Kill won the 2014 Lexi Roditsky Editor's Choice Award, and The Language of My Captor was a finalist for the 2017 National Book Award, as well as the Los Angeles Times Book Prize and a winner for the 2018 Ansfield Wolf Book Awards. McCrae received a Landon Literary Award in 2018, a Guggenheim Fellowship in 2019. Sometimes I Never Suffered was a finalist for the Maya Angelou Book Award, the T.S. Eliot Prize, and the Rilke Prize. In 2020, McCrae received a New York Foundation for the Artist Fellowship. He was the recipient of the 2023 Arthur Rentz Poetry Prize and 2022 Michael Marks Awards. Finally, he is a recipient of the National Endowment for the Arts. Safe to say the man knows how to write. On his writing, McCrae is a master of poetic structure and intimate description. In the many hundreds of ascents, McCrae uses intense enjambment and repetition to create a stream of consciousness narration that reminds us of the fickleness and distorted nature of our internal monologues, our lineage, and our collective cultural knowledge. The censuras, or gaps in the lines, not only create a distinct rhythm, but offer a visual sense of the gaps in one's memory. Much of McCrae's work focuses around the extreme presence, absence, and faultiness of memory, and how that can affect us in our present-day lives, our futures, and the futures of those we care about. He dissects the understanding of family, regarding his own trauma of his white grandparents kidnapping him from his black father, his mundane but beautiful moments with his daughter, and what it means to be a mixed-race person. McCrae writes history into a vulnerable and weighty light. He encourages his readers to sit and understand the effects of history on black individuals and women. Most of all, Shane McCrae's work invites you to think, to stew, to find the meanings in his metaphors and genius of his line. It is your opportunity to do so now. Please welcome Shane McCrae.
Hi, can you all hear me? Mm-hmm. Okay, cool. Well, thank you, Bailey. Thank you, Sandy. Thank you, everybody, for coming to this thing. Okay. All right. I'm gonna read poems. All right. So I was talking to folks earlier about these Donald Trump poems I write. I can't stop writing them, but they don't fit with anything else in their read. So you'll just have to imagine that they're very funny. Just imagine, like, what's the best poem I've ever read, and then, like, you know, times 10. That's one of my Trump poems. So, but you know, not tonight. Okay. This is called The Many Hundreds of Dissent. Oh, So I use a word in it. The word is cops. And I always worry that it sounds like cops. So no one will know that by cops, I mean a small group of trees, not cops, the police. But yeah, by cops, I mean cops. So this is the many hundreds of the Senate. Friend, I have turned the brambles back. I used an instrument, a weapon. Though it wasn't a weapon, it was an instrument. An oar to which I had affixed a sheet of plywood 3 feet by 3 feet earlier. An instrument, a weapon. Something like a sword with a large square tip, but like a sign a protester might wave. I leaned the plywood against the brambles as I walked the path this morning, leaning all my weight against the plywood, repeatedly, so that I must have looked like a pro wrestler as I turned the brambles this morning, bouncing off the ropes. But endless ropes at the single boundary of an endless ring. Though it isn't endless, the path ends. But who was watching me this morning as I walked the clotted path, breaking sorrows from the path? Follow the path. I've yet to sweep the wreckage of the brambles from its edges. You will find the tower we have often built together, you from imagination, I from memory, as beams of the last sunlight flared. Oh, there it goes. Blurrily flared across the wall, the last of the day, shaped by the blinds, each glowing on the wall as if each beam were a ghost beam of wood floating from the wall, burning. And we have watched as slowly they flew away into the dark. And though we know it's an illusion made by the sunlight through the blinds, the slats are shaped like beams of wood, the spaces where they don't fit together, shaped like beams of wood, through which the sunlight enters. Still, we have watched the beams that hold the house together flee the wall, like ashes flying upward, burning. Didn't you once confide in me? You stumbled, chasing ashes with your eyes, as the ashes fled a fire you couldn't yet see clearly, raging in the heart of the copse you had been approaching, as they rose above the tops of the tallest of the band of evergreens. And the ashes might have been pine needles flying from the pines, but none of the trees, no pine, no cedar, no fir tree burned. You heard no noise of burning, but you felt the heat, and you had seen light. No telling what had called you to the window. Was it merely that you wanted to see the sun? You saw the distant light of the fire burning in the copse beyond the barn, and you realized you might not ever have another chance to see the trees up close, whose provenance and continued health, exposed to storms of black exhaust and storms of gravel kicked from the gravel road by pickup trucks as the trucks fishtail past the gate, and the copse marking my boundary. The trees whose health had, from the day you first appeared and spoke to me, seemed incomprehensible to you. What did you say then? Not your first words to me, but those you whispered as I turned the locks, curious who had struck the door so fiercely, so frantically had rung the doorbell. It had been, but I was young, a child still, 10 years since any visitor had come unasked, and you so calm on the porch, not even facing the door. I thought for sure you were watching whoever had knocked, had rung, was running away. But there was no one there but you. And as you neared the copse, when you were 10 feet away, the trees seemed suddenly to huddle closer to the burning center, as if they were protecting you. And just as suddenly, you turned and ran back to the house. No strangeness mars the path now, friend. I've turned back even the strangeness that once made the path familiar. And the trees, by standing still, by moving only with the wind, will answer your old fear and curiosity. And at the end of the path, you will see the tower, distant still, but rising, at first by itself against the sky. But soon you will see the fruiting gorge grove, the leaves of the tallest trees obscuring from your vision the tower's lowest windows. You will know at once it is no fearful and burning heart, the tower, the lowest windows of which you do not yet see. Amidst the orange trees, their suspended flames, you'll find a peaceful place, my memories of which I've until now guarded by allowing dense brambles to overgrow the only path to the orange grove. But I've turned them back, the brambles, with an instrument, a weapon. Take the path. Before you can see the grove, you will smell it, a ghost of oranges in the air. One ghost of oranges is hundreds of ghosts, a lifetime each, of each the many hundreds of the scent of oranges you've tasted, newborn each time you tasted it, that hung like rain on the air, that for so long as it hangs on the air, makes air the purest form of rain. The tower will seem to rise from the scent itself, from the scent of oranges in the midst of the undifferentiated view, as if scent, like touch, were place. A home not made of memories, but the next searching inhalation, always the next, with which the scent returns. Oh, thank you. Poems are long. So, okay, cool. All right. I wrote a bunch of myth-based poems for my, I guess, book before this most recent book. And they're all, except for one, adapted from poems I wrote in graduate school. I don't know how I'm telling you that. This is one of them. It's called Penelope and the Watching Fire. She burned the loom each night for heat, but each morning it returned whole and draped with a restless blue fabric, a wave's skeleton. The first few mornings it appeared, she was surprised by the wave. She had publicly vowed she would not lay eyes upon the sea until her husband, who even as she spoke her vow, perhaps lay drowned in the sea, returned. And soon she came to believe the wave was sent to her by the god of waves to torment her. One of her suitors, an attractive man but too young, had told her as her husband's slaves cleared breakfast from the room of the blinding of the Cyclops by no man, who she was sure was her husband. Perhaps the bones with which she wove were his. Perhaps she would not see him again, but instead would labor always, her fingers bloodying the blue threads at the machine of her husband's bones. And so she thought of him, long years into his absence, as his slaves stuffed the loom, its hollow parts, the gaps in its workings with straw, as she watched them bend, who could not choose how to use their strength. Well, thank you. That's very nice. Okay. I'm not going to read this one. Okay. Well, so usually I introduce these poems by pointing out that I was kidnapped as a toddler, but you already know that. So that's what you should have in mind, I guess. In the ditch where the camera finds my body. I'm splashing in a driveway in a ditch in which a corpse of rain is gathered. Here, a corpse is gathered, wearing nothing, a full diaper. I am free. A clear sky leans as if upon a bar, upon the house of everyone in the picture. My grandmother, me. I am the rain come down. My mother's parents. I'm just kidding. Is it bad? No. Cool. My mother's parents have just kidnapped me. I am the corpse in which I play. I'm dancing in the corpse. The clear sky sickens watching, but with no clouds in the sky can't move away. Behind me, picking flowers my mother's mother sees, the green has fled the leaf. Oh, reader, listener, stay. You are now evidence. Okay. This is called After My Grandparents Kidnapped Me, They Moved to a New Development. The only scenes I know are scenes my mother's parents thought to take pictures of. Me in the ditch, my mother's father in the yard before the fence was built, before the lawn was fitted to the earth's face, like a face after a mauling. He is posing like a hunter in the dirt. He grips a hoe and kneels in the corpse called everywhere. A neighborhood is coming, where an armed man kneels and grins. That man will build a house. This is called. All right, wait.
Yeah, let me cut it.
Cool. Okay, this is called explaining my ignorance in certain pictures. In pictures now, I do not smile, and didn't then. I would laugh if I was being tickled. And sometimes one, my mother's mother, would tickle me, and the other would take the picture, my mother's father. And so sometimes I'm not smiling, but I'm laughing. My eyes closed and my mouth open, almost like I'm screaming, but I'm laughing. When I was a child, in pictures with my kidnappers. With one, my mother's mother, always her. I'm sitting most often in her lap, her arms around my blurred waist. She has me on Ritalin, and the trick is wait until the laughing stops. As the mouth closes, you can take the smile. Thank you. So, in this poem I use the word GIF, and I always worry that people listening are going to think it's the word gift with a T. So I'm letting you know it's gift, not gift. This is in the house from which I was kidnapped. The pale blinds rise and fall, a gift forever. The blinds move on their own. At first, my father stands with the string between his fingers, first and middle pulling, even after it tears into his fingers, tears the first and middle skin. Him pulling, letting go, his blood staining the length of the looped string nearest him. He pulls the string for years. Eventually, he backs away from the window into the room. He doesn't turn. Now he watches from the shadow in the room for a small child to be returned to him. I see him watching. From deeper in the shadow whenever I look into his eyes. The shadow grows the way a child grows. So I keep thinking that what I really want to do is read you a poem that I don't have with me. And so you saw me, I assume, a few minutes ago, like fumbling with my phone because it's probably somewhere on the internet. And now I'm at this stage, if you haven't been to the stage speaking to people, you will be at some point in your life, where I'm just hoping that if I think about it enough, it will like manifest on my phone screen and I can read it to you, and I won't have to like open my phone and try to find it. So that's where we're at now. If it manifests, I'll let you know. Okay. This is called The Doorway. Dido stood at the tide line, watching Aeneas' ship burn on the horizon, a small sand-colored dog nibbling at her ankle. Though Carthage itself had seemed to whisper for days of her shamelessness with Aeneas, the city breathing without her, even as she at last felt she filled the city. She had not blushed when a priest whispered the news of Aeneas' sudden flight in her ear, but only waved at the captain behind him, who turned and waved at men stationed on the other side of a doorway, through which, at that moment, she would not look. Now she pictured Aeneas wildly swinging his bright sword, panicked, killing his own men, his son weeping, whose fragile body had lured her into Aeneas' arms. She saw Aeneas bloody with a Carthaginian arrow through his neck, his arms spread wide, floating for a moment, face down in the sea, before his heavy armor buried him. She clapped her hands together, and the dog sat suddenly upright. trained to expect meat at the sound. But she had none. He barked, and she clapped again. I'm pretty sure that bump on the doorway when I was a grad student, when I was young and made bad decisions, was called meat rather than the doorway. I'm now glad it is not called meat, but it was called meat once. You saw me with my eyes to pray for that moment manifest. This doesn't happen. Okay. As I said earlier, the poems have to do with myth. I wrote mostly as a graduate student. For whatever reason, they just kind of stuck with me for years. I think because when I wrote them, I wasn't a good enough poet to have written them. And they weren't right, but there was something about them that, I don't know, I thought was exciting to me. And so they just kind of stuck in my head for a decade or so. And when I was writing this book, it suddenly occurred to me that I could probably fix them if I applied what it required was for me to stop, to make them not free verse novels, essentially. And then when I wrote them, I thought I wanted to do one more. And so that's how this poem came to be. So this is the only one of those that I did not write largely in graduate school, and it is called Helen. It's in 3 parts. 1. Helen's spear. Helen studied Achilles from her room in the palace that was Paris's room, while Paris fretted and paced, or slept, or bragged to his pages about the swiftness with which he would dispatch Achilles, if only his father would allow him to fight. The life of a prince is not his own, he would say to the 3 bored boys, and to the 4th boy who listened. He owes his duty not to the great, no, lads, but to the humble. And he would turn then to the window from which Helen watched Achilles kill, but he would close his eyes. Helen studied Achilles. Helen studied him as she had studied her furious husband Menelaus in the months before she fled him with Paris. Helen studied Achilles, memorizing him, this small, quick man who was more fearsome than her husband. Within a year, whenever she saw him knock a spear thrust away, she felt his muscles twitch beneath her skin. She leaped back whenever a Trojan lunged at him, and in the years that followed, she began to lunge at him. She began to knock his spear away. And soon she realized her lunges were faster than his. Her spear was faster. And as she and Paris watched Hector emerge from the city to battle Achilles for the first time, she said to Paris, "I love your brother, but Achilles will kill him. And your father will command you then to fight Achilles. Command your boys to prepare your armor, but not the youngest. I don't think the child can bear to lose you." Paris nodded, and that night, while Helen pretended to sleep, escaped the palace through the secret tunnel she had mentioned to the youngest page the day before. Helen rose and stepped to the window. She watched Paris sneak from shadow to shadow across the beach. Her spear arm twitched as she watched. 2. Helen of Troy. The voice of Achilles rolled over the gates, and many in the city thought the gates had been breached. So loudly did his voice resound. And some men fell immediately, as if they had been commanded, on their swords, abandoning their children, their wives, their slaves, to the wrath they heard coming. The wrath was one man, making himself look taller, a few inches. His voice sounded slightly louder, by standing on his toes on the back of the corpse of the warrior he had fought and killed the day before. Hector, once the champion of Troy, before the city's unbroken gates and high walls. He shouted, "The best of you by far is now dead. Return the wife of Menelaus, and I will spare your city. Defy me, and I will claim your wives." And some men heard this, and thought he spoke from their homes, their beds, and fell on their swords. In the palace, Helen stepped away from her window and strapped on Paris's armor and the bronze mask he wore when sparring, though his opponents, fearing execution, had always avoided his face, took his spear and his thick shield, and snuck from the palace, through the tunnel through which Paris had escaped the night before. Emerging on the other side of the wall, 100 feet from Achilles, she made her voice deep, and she shouted, "I am Paris, Prince of Troy. I come now to kill the man who killed my brother." Helen didn't wait for Achilles to reply, but ran toward him, sunlight glaring off the mask, changing its aspect from Paris's playful glower to the face of Thanatos, not smiling and not frowning, who doesn't fight but reaps. She rammed Achilles from Hector's back with her heavy shield and almost knocked him down, but he stumbled backward into Greeks who shoved him forward again. He pulled his spear from the sand, where he had left it erect next to Hector's corpse, and lunged at Helen, who knocked the tip of his spear down with her spear. And his spear lodged in the sand and raised Achilles for a moment like a vaulting pole. For a long moment he held the spear, and the awed Greeks watched him. Rise. But then he let go and landed square on his feet. Achilles cried out for a spear, and Odysseus flung Hector's spear to him. He caught it as he leaped at Helen, slamming his shield into hers, breaking her shield armor. Though she didn't feel it breaking, but only slid backward in the sand a few inches, and raised her spear to block the hacking strike Achilles attempted with Hector's spear. Hector's spear, weakened in the fight between Hector and Achilles, broke on Helen's spear, and Helen kicked Achilles' legs from beneath him and flung away her spear. She jumped on him then, pinning his arms with her knees and smashing the edge of her shield down on his face, just above his nose, and smashed the edge of her shield down on his throat, and smashed the edge of her shield down on his forehead. And as she raised her shield to smash it down again, she saw blood dripping from the edge, and shards of bone as dark as blood falling from the iron edge of her shield. And she turned and smashed the edge of her shield down on his groin. And she stood and threw her shield at the backs of the Greeks, who were fleeing now to their ships. Some men in the city still groaned, their swords in their stomachs. Paris's pages, who had never once attended him in battle, left the city to claim Hector's corpse for Troy. 3. Helen after Troy. The battle over, Helen raised her mask. Blood dimmed its bronze cheeks and forehead. Its bronze chin shielded her eyes from the sun. She ordered her youngest page, who had before served Paris, to hurry back to Troy and to return with Hector's horse, to lead the horse on a new rope to her. And though the horse refused to trample the smashed corpse of Achilles into the sand he had earned, still she untied it, first feeling then her shield arm was broken. Still, she shouted the horse away. That poem, I wrote the last part first. And then it just had all these details, and I thought, oh, I guess I need to write something that explains why all this stuff is here. So I guess it's raining now. Okay, so I have this poem. Well, it's going to say poem, I guess it is a poem. I have this book called New and Collected Hell, and it's really just one long poem. It's epic. The technical term for the kind of epic it is Napoleon, which is Epylllion, which is a short. And it's about somebody going to hell. And the person, the protagonist, dies and goes to hell, and in hell, he's greeted by this robotic bird that swears a lot. And I feel a little weird suddenly reading a poem with a bunch of swears in it, but I guess as I see see the outline of the cross here. Is I'm just going to do it. I mean, it's the math now. It is about hell or whatever. I'm just going to read the first part. It's called it's called Intake. Describe the lake. I'm still not sure how I got here. I was just hiking. Or not exactly hiking, but I like to walk in the woods. Behind my house, I mean my apartment. In the woods behind the complex, so I'm hiking. It's a nice day, sure. A little hot, I guess, but there's a nice breeze, so I'm hiking up this hill. And I start to get really hot, and I can't breathe, but I just need maybe to rest for just a minute. I look for a bench, a rock, or something, but I can't see anywhere to sit. And now I have to sit. I think I'll faint. Then suddenly, I'm rowing. I'm surrounded now by sailboats, nice boats, yachts, I guess. I mean, that's just a big boat, right? White yachts and sailboats, and I'm rowing this. It's small, an open boat. I'm rowing, but it's like I'm on a track. The waves don't rock my boat. And I stop rowing, but I don't slow down. Plus, I'm invisible. This yacht is drifting, looks like it's drifting, and it slams into me, I mean bang. I thought I would die, but it bounces off. The people on the yacht, they all look like that one rich guy on Gilligan's Island. Well, they don't hear it, don't even flinch. It's like they're on tracks on the yacht. It's like they're robots at Chuck E. Cheese, and me, it's like I'm in a bubble on a track, too. I'm fine. I don't feel a thing. So now, of course, I'm terrified. Describe the bird. The bird looked like a big gray seagull, but the bird looked like a robot too, but free. The bird looked free. It dove and landed in the boat at my feet, in between my feet, and spoke. It sounded like a dog barking. It sounded like it couldn't speak. It said, barking, it said, hey, fuck you, fucking shithead, follow me. And coughed this little toy skeleton hand up, middle finger up, and then it took off barking. And the bird looked free. It couldn't have been free if I was stuck and followed it, stuck on a track. Or maybe the bird was free, but everybody has a loss. I let the oars slip into the lake, except they didn't sink, they just stood there. Then heads and necks and faces sprouted from the handles, then arms and legs sprouted from the sides, and the oars walked away. Describe the oars. They walked on water like oars. Their faces steamed in the sun, and the steam caught the light from the sun, and glowed above their heads. They walked away from where the boat was going. Describe the gate. The boat kept going toward this weird whirlpool in the middle of the lake. The water looked pixelated, white but splotchy, and the water swirled pixel by pixel, from pixel to pixel. It looked like it would hurt to fall in. The pixels looked like churning teeth, and that's where the boat took me. The gate chewed it to splinters, and as the boat broke, it sank. I looked down and saw I was floating level with the surface of the lake, and the lake on all sides was disappearing, fading, and I saw night beneath me. For a moment I was. Anyone watching from above me would have seen a bright spot in the darkness. I must have looked exactly like, if only then, the man I always thought I was, high above hell, and then I fell. So, traditionally, when you're 2 poems away from the end, you're supposed to announce that there's just 2 poems left. But I didn't do that, so now there's just 1 poem left. And this is called Thinking of the Children or On Student Protests. Americans love children, the idea of sometimes the execution, sometimes one-on-one. We know which children to steer clear of. But send us funny clips. We'll love the funnily sad kids in the funny clips. We'll love our own with an inspired love then, and pull them close as if they each child or the moth-chewed blanket we found in our mother's hallway closet when we threw away the things, and hold them close until we smell their stink. We love our children while the singer sings about their fathers beating them. The link disappeared or we would have given money, but hearts are money, so we heart the song. The cutest kitten shivers and has runny eyes, or at least it can't retract its tongue, and will die smiled at. Love is smiles and crying. Oh, the big-eyed kid whose big eye runs. We love that kid, those kids, heart each sick eye, and we have tear gas for the healthy ones. That's it, thank you. I think it's Q&A time. So I'll just stand here. Ready to egg. You know that?
Let's see, this is not on. No, it's not reached. Text board.
Haley needs to just do everything. All right, so we have time for questions. Who has a question?
So during lunch, we kind of had a conversation about how race kind of comes up in your work and how you present it and write about it. Specifically, your own point of view, but also some of the historical events that you end up writing about in some of your earlier collections. I was just wondering if you could kind of rehash what you said at lunch or talk a little bit about that as well, because I thought it was very insightful.
I like that question. Of course, I cannot rehash what I said at lunch. I don't remember. What would I have said about race? Yeah, I don't know. I can try to talk about race in poem. I have no idea what I said. Actually, I don't know. Is there any way you can narrow that down a little bit? Like what kind of?
Because you kind of talked about how Black people, especially Black poets, when they're doing self-discovery, they have to talk about race and how that relates to themselves and then moving forward.
Sure, I remember that. Well, I did say that. It was very rambly. So I'll try to sort of say in a more concise way what I said. I was just talking about how, so for a lot of writers, maybe most, your early work is, the stuff, the first published stuff, is kind of an expression of sort of self-discovery, self-exploration. And the people who are reading your first books are sort of watching that happen. For a lot of Black writers, and it's the same, but it's because our self-exploration involves also an exploration of a history that's really difficult. I think a lot of readers kind of bind that up with the identities of Black writers in a kind of permanent way. A lot of readers tend to expect Black writers to keep doing that, as if when we were doing it to begin with, it weren't self-exploration. They just sort of, I guess it's sort of like readers think it's more like a subject matter that we're exploring and not sort of coming to terms with who we are. And it's just that coming to terms is connected to history. And so I think that for a lot of Black writers, I mean, obviously I can't speak for us all, but for a lot of Black writers, there eventually comes a certain exhaustion of talking about the subject, but some readers think that you just kind of should be doing it forever.
I'm curious if you could speak a little bit to your inspiration and thought process behind pairing a lot of the more mythological poems with the works in this book, they're very personal, and your process behind that.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think a lot of poets don't think about what they do. And so, at least I know I don't. There was none. It was more, those were the ones I had around. What the thinking goes into, or not the thinking, you try to get a sense of what things are working together. And that sense will be fairly intuitive. It won't be, it's not something you're like writing an essay about in your head. You just sort of like making a mixtape. And what poems do you think make sense together? What poems kind of sound right? When I was writing that book, Many Hundreds of Descent, which is everything I read about the Hell poem and the last poem today, my goal was rather, I wanted to make a book that wasn't divided into sections, because I'd never done that, and that always just looked cool. And so I was just trying to figure out how can I get from the beginning to the end without having to break the book into parts. And for me, it's, writing about the self, and writing about historical figures, and writing about imagined characters. The long poem, The Many Hundreds of Descent, is just about imagined characters. It's not really different, except for writing about the self is really boring. Whereas writing about imagined characters and historical figures is interesting. Maybe writing about the self isn't really boring, it's just not as interesting as writing about imagined figures. But I felt like the poems all kind of, at least, felt like they worked together.
Hi, this one's a little bit more about craft, but you did mention that you had a few poems, quite a few that you kind of wrote in grad school, revisited, reworked, and so I guess my question is, with those poems, did you keep the originals and then work off of that? And how did you recognize when you needed to set something down and piggyback again?
For me, I'll work at a poem until I get irritated about it and then probably ruin it. And so I don't really have a good developed sense of when to set it down, it's just when it's not working anymore. With those, I started keeping digital folders of poems that I was working on actually like when I started grad school, that's when I started doing that. So I have all my manuscripts from 20 whatever years ago. And I guess the ending of the melody poem, and maybe not the ending of the title poem. Those are all new, all that stuff is new. And the Helen poem is totally new. And yeah, as I said, I don't know, you write a poem until you have to stop. And that's you put it down. Thank you.
Hello.
Hi.
A lot of your poems, especially some of my favorites, such as your series of Jim Winger poems, focus a lot on very kind of personal and also intense, just kind of snapshots of history. How did you find working history into your art? How do you connect it to your art? How do you connect yourself to history?
Good questions. I started for very practical reasons, or at least reasons that seem practical to me. So I wrote my first book, and it got accepted. And there's usually a window between the book that's accepted and when it comes out of some length. So I had time to sit around, and I read this blog. It was called First Book Interviews. If you ever think about doing a first book, you should read First Book Interviews. In it, well, I read a lot of stories of how people's first books were received, and that gave me a sense of how mine would be received. And so I didn't want the book to come out, me to get bummed about people either not liking it or ignoring it, and then feel like I was stuck. And so I started writing the second book right away. I started writing it way before the first book was out. And actually I had this chapbook called In Canaan that came out before my first book, but those are all poems. If you've read my books, I guess you know, those are all poems in the second book. So, when I was writing that second book, partly because I was doing it so near when I was writing that when I had written the first book, partly because just of my own personal anxieties, I wanted it to be very different from the first book, at least in subject matter. And I stumbled across the story of Margaret Garner. I hadn't read Beloved yet, so I didn't know about that. I stumbled across the story. Margaret Garner. Oh. Okay. I stumbled across the story. I wrote a poem, then did more research in order to write more poems. And then, right after that process was done, almost as if by providence, I found this book of just a bunch of like slave testimonials, and I converted those into poems, and just then I found a book about lynching, and I read that, and converted the source of that into poems. And all of this stuff had to do with history, and it was partly because I just didn't want the book I was writing to sound like the book I'd written before, and so I was doing different subjects. But I didn't really think about how to place myself in relation to material. That wasn't really, I just did it, and I just wrote it. There was no thought process that goes into it. Or there wasn't then, and there kind of maybe wouldn't be now. I think that questions like that, which are very good questions, and they're questions that have to do with ethics and a number of important things, have very little to do with actually making things. They're more like thinking about the thing you've made. But when you're making a thing, generally, maybe it's not the same for everybody, you just kind of have to make it. And if you get lost in thinking about the big important questions that having to do with the thing you're making, what will end up happening is you lose the thing. Whereas I think it generally works better to make it, think about it, and then you think, oh wait, maybe this wasn't good. Maybe I shouldn't have done it, and then you just don't. And stuff, It never goes anywhere, you put it in a drawer. I've written plenty of poems like that, where in retrospect, I'm like, oh, this one's a bummer, I shouldn't have written it. And then you go on. But if you worry about, can I place myself in relation to this story, you end up locking down your imagination. You end up locking down your imagination in relation to the poem you're writing, and that might seem okay for that poem, but you cannot predict how locking down your imagination with regard to that subject will end up closing off other things. And so it's better to just sort of approach it in an open way. I think. For me.
We have time for a couple more questions.
In a lot of your poems, you use the caesura gap in words. I wanted to know if there's like a method to where you place them, or is it just like a natural feeling thing?
Yeah, it's just vibes. and sometimes you start to feel, or one starts to feel, or I feel, anxious about like not having done that for a while. And so then I'll do it again. Always with the effort to make it sound good, though, not just random.
So I have another one. I guess I'm being greedy with the questions.
No, awesome.
So in your answers, you referred back to sound a lot, and musicality, and I'm wondering, when you are writing these, and you're talking about, oh, I think I might need another break here,
Yeah.
do you read them out loud to yourself after you've done them to see how they'll flow together, and then do you make adjustments, or do you just do it in your head?
Yeah, no, I kind of read them out loud while I'm working on it. And I make adjustments that way. I saw the lightning, and so I just like stopped because I knew what was happening. I'll make adjustments that way. But it's rare that I'll read the whole thing to myself out loud when it's done. It's more like kind of spot checking. But sometimes, you read it in your head, you kind of get a sense of how it's operating and how it might work in relation to other poems. Yeah, but I think it's important to read it out loud. Parts of it, at least, kind of always, especially when you're not sure whether something's working.
So I just have a quick question about how do you let go of your poems after you're done with them and be like, okay, these are other people's now, I need to let it go. Is that something that I think can be very difficult? But you seem to have a very yes, whatever kind of attitude about that, which is very cool. And I want to know how do you do that, because I want to do that.
Well, you may have trouble because the secret is being not very smart. So I just don't think about it that much. Maybe,
I think it's possible, there was.
yeah. Okay, so yeah, I just don't think about it that hard. But I can tell you how I got started. I decided I wanted to be a poet at 16. And I started writing when I was 15, but it said at 16 that this was really what I was going to do. And I immediately started sending things around because I thought that was part of doing it, was if you're publishing things, you're kind of involved in that conversation. The conversation of the poetry world, I don't know. They were terrible, of course. But I started doing that. And in order to do that, I had to, this is a 16-year-old me thinking, I had to, give up the idea. I guess the early thought I had was thinking, well, if I am going to be a writer, if I succeed at it, I have to give up the notion of having what people generally understand to be a private life. Because I'm going to write poems, and if people read them, I might include personal information. So I have to just get over the notion that I all my information is like a secret or whatever. And I think that's related. I think that often a difficulty letting poems go is really a difficulty regarding what are people going to say about them when they see them. And that's a different question, and there's no trick to that. That is just getting used to it until it is less. I saw it. That is just getting used to it until it's kind of less painful. Like, I wanted to be a professional skateboarder, and it used to be that, the first time that I broke my foot, I crawled into the garage, screaming. It was the worst thing I ever felt. The fourth time I broke my foot, I turned to my friend and I said, "Oh, dude, I think I broke my foot." And it didn't hurt so bad because I'd done it a bunch. It's the same thing with showing your poems to people. At first, it's just difficult, and the more you do it, the easier it is. And that's all there is. It's not like a secret, it's just doing it.
Sorry, more. A lot of your poems that I'm specifically drawn to, like the Hell poem for one, and Jim Whitmer for another, use a lot of interesting aspects of cosmology. So your interpretations, your ideas of heaven or hell in really kind of interesting, weird, kind of intense ways. And I was just wondering how you go about organizing a lot of those weird elements, or where do you get inspiration for what these different afterlives look like?
That's a good one. Where does all the inspiration? Okay. You just kind of. There's a paradox here. So I believe in God. But when I say I believe in God, maybe this is what everybody means, but it's hard to look inside everybody's brain, so I can just say what I mean when I say it. I mean that I believe in God in a way, kind of, that I believe in this lectern, except for I'm more certain about God than I am about this lectern, And so, paradoxically, I can kind of say whatever I want. church, or whatever I think it is not real. God is real.
My nonsense. My nonsense is just
Nonsense. It's just me talking about this thing, with regard to which nobody has any idea. And with regard to which, like our standard semi-theological notions are almost certainly, like, easily provable wrong. Like the way people think of heaven, you die, you go to heaven, and you hang out with your kitten or whatever, your kitten is not, the Bible says something totally different about the afterlife. There is no dying and hanging out with your kitten. It's totally different thing. And the kitten image is a lot nicer. I like kittens. And so, when I read about hell, I think, well, what do we think hell is like? And then I read that. If you actually read the Bible, the Christian scriptures don't ever mention hell even once. There is no hell in it. It's something that, in a weird way, I think it comforts people to think that there's justice, including hell, in the end. And so, I just think about, well, what's really awful? What's bad? What's unpleasant? Would a bird swear at me all the time? Maybe. That seems unpleasant. You just, it can be anything because it's nothing, if that makes sense, And so it's a great field into which you can just imagine anything, because anything could be. So it doesn't come out of anything. It's just that, I play a lot of video games, maybe something comes out of that, but it's just you write and, think about, well, what horrible thing could happen here? And then that's what happens. Heaven, I don't actually think I can write, and I don't think I will. I'm doing a poem that's kind of purgatory-ish right now. That seems okay. I definitely don't believe in purgatory, but I'm doing a purgatory because why not? But heaven, yeah, I don't know about that.
I think it's time for probably our final question.
Is that okay?
Two.
Is there any chance you can do one of the Trump poems? I'm intrigued.
Yeah, I can do it, but they're obviously not the best ones to read. But I mean, sure. Let's see. I'll do two, actually. The reason I'll do two is because, give you a sense of what's going on here. So they're all sonnets. Occasionally they're not. But I think it's kind of funny to make Trump talk in sonnets. And so that's what they are. Hold on a second. It may be a sort of thing where you think you're going to like it, and then it turns out, oh, wait a minute. Much like Donald Trump himself. You're like, oh, maybe not. Okay, I'll read you two. This is called Blank Verse Sonnet on America is Listening. Come on, America, who buys a judge? I don't buy judges. I just maybe talk about their kids where you might hear me talking. Or maybe I don't talk. You saw the mug shot, right? So I don't need to talk. It's good, the shot. One eye is bad, the eye looks bad. It's like it's sick, but no. A very respected doctor said I'm healthier than any other president. And you could hear the shiver in his voice. No, I don't need to talk. Maybe I'll cry a single tear from my bad eye. You know what's tough? It's tough to cry. And just by crying, make somebody kill whoever made you cry. That's one. I'll read another one because this thing just happened. This is pseudo-Petrarchan sonnet. He fired several members of the National Security Council after Laura Loomer urged him to do so. Who knows what women want? I think they like me, right? They like me. That's what people say. The experts. Body language experts, they tell me. Decorum experts, coaches. Mike Johnson, he calls so late. He calls so late he wakes me up to ask me, does he think they like me? I can almost hear him blink when I say yes. Laura participated in the meeting, yes. She's very bright. A brilliant girl. A brilliant woman, right? She had a list of names. She wants to keep me safe, that's good. She tells me she can't sleep thinking about staff loyalty. No tyrant is loved like that. Real women want what I want. There you go. See, though, it's like, yeah, do I clap for this? I understand that.
All right, our last question.
So this next one is a very college tradition I carry the torch on quite masterfully, I must say. If you would be so kind as to give the audience your thoughts, feelings, and opinions on Beyonce, that we would really appreciate.
Okay. I mean, honestly, no, it's disappointing. I don't really have thoughts. Yeah, that's pretty bad, right? I don't really have thoughts about Beyonce. I remember Destiny's Child and I like that. And, okay, here's my thought. I like it when she raps. She's very good at rapping. I appreciate it very much. I like that she kind of does fast raps. You know, it's just nice. And it's so weird to hear her talking because she's so, like, against giving her opinion. And, like, when she raps, she's, like, very definitely saying things. You're like, okay,